It's Tuesday, November 29th. We are closing in on closing out November. I'm GHK Lal on Kaieteur Radio, 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Welcome to the National Outlook. Last week we had some flooding. We had some rains. I wouldn't call them excessive rains. We had some rains that lasted a long time, several hours, on and off. And before we knew it, almost all of Georgetown was flooded. I mean, really flooded. I'm telling you, I had to come here to Kaieteur News to do some things. And to navigate the streets was a horror story. I go home and I get an advisory from, of all places, the United States Embassy. It looks after its citizens. It sends them these advisories. It had done one or a couple of them a little while back when there were elections and say, be cautious. It sent out others when crime had really spiked. I remember one about the marketplace and the border market area being a problem. So I go home and there's this advisory from, of all places, the United States Embassy telling me about floods and November to January and intermittent rainfall forecasted and sandbags and the rest. It's welcomed. It's a good thing. It means well. And I'm sure that the government is doing the same thing through advisories, the meteorology office, the village councils, etc. But why is it that our capital city floods so quickly, so easily, and takes such a long time to drain off? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be when year after year, my fellow Guyanese, we spend so many hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on flood control. And I'm not talking about the city alone. The city is the most congested and the most visible part of the country. But we have other areas along the East Coast. Classic example, flood prone. Why is it that after all the money spent on cokers and workers and pumps and pump attendants and all kinds of other things that are over my head, why is it that we flood so quickly? Why is it that we have to live like this? The Georgetown Hospital, New Market Street, I'm very familiar with the area. The rains came and we didn't have a pool, we had a lake. We had almost a river. I mean, people are going into the hospital in a time of COVID and coming out of the hospital in a time of a virus that still frightens out most of us, even though we don't wear masks, etc. at this time. But we have flood, and we have flood waters to our ankles, sometimes to mid-calf, sometimes to our knees. This, again, should not be when we are spending so much money. When we are spending so much money on flood prevention or flood control, whichever is applicable. Like corruption, which you're going to hear, like corruption, year after year we talk about it, seem to be doing something to address it, and we are always in the same place. We hear about pumps not having fuel. We read about pumps not working. What was happening when it was dry? Why do we end up in the same place over and over again? Mismanagement, inefficiency, foolishness, skullduggery. I think it's a combination of all of those things. So if we can't deal with these things, not so much the flood, but the things that help us with the flood, the tools, the people, how are we going to deal with oil? How are we ever going to be able to have the right mindset and the right skills and the right attitudes to deal with the national patrimony, which is our oil? Floods. It's an embarrassment, like domestic violence, flooding in our capital.